Hey, Alive Youth Group, checking in with you here on another Wednesday. I want to dive into James chapter 1. And what we're going to talk about here tonight is the topic of frustration, dealing with frustration. There's all kinds of things that can kind of boil up inside of us and cause us to be frustrated. With this COVID-19, you might be frustrated thinking about when is this going to end? Is there an end date? That's where I am. That frustrates me. Where's the light at the end of the tunnel? Maybe your family, the fact that you are surrounded by them more, maybe your brother, sister, mom, or dad, just some relationships are causing some frustration for you. You might be thinking to yourself, I don't understand why God allowed this to happen. Maybe you're frustrated towards God. You also might be saying, I don't understand why we've got to be so cautious about everything. It's no big deal. And that might be frustrating you. You don't agree with something. Maybe you have a disagreement with who knows what, a friend, family member, politics, whatever, a stance on an issue, and you disagree with a particular angle. So again, there's all kinds of things that can cause anger and frustration to kind of start boiling up inside of us. And I don't know about you, but it doesn't take me long to think about a time where I was frustrated. I can very quickly rattle off the last time I was frustrated and a number of times throughout my life that frustration just grabbed hold of me. And so, can you? Can you think about a time where you were frustrated? My guess is you probably can. For again, any number of reasons, they didn't break your way. Um, I think essentially what it comes down to is this idea of friction. We get frustrated in our lives when we face some kind of friction where things don't go the way we want them to, or think they should, or expect them to. And that causes that anger to kind of just start building. Um, like one of my good buddies says, Roger. He says, "It makes me fussy," right? And so I like that word too, fussy. There's all kinds of things that are going to make us fussy, and I'm sure you've felt that, maybe even recently. Now, newsflash: there's nothing you can do to avoid it. Friction in some way, shape, fashion, or form is going to hit all of us at some point. Um, but that's not the point. The point is, for me and for us here, is to think about it biblically and to respond with godly wisdom in our frustration. Okay, so I've got 3 points and 2 questions. 3 points and 2 questions, and I'm going to bang through them in about 5 minutes. Okay, so here we go. Number one, uh, we all face it, and you can't avoid it. I'm repeating myself, but I think it's worth repeating. Frustration and anger, we're all going to face it. There's nothing we can do to avoid it. Life is not going to be smooth sailing all the time. Okay? Waves of turbulence are going to come. All right? So that's point number one. Point number two, and this is an interesting one because I think it's if you're not careful, or if you don't think about it, it's an easy one to have a misconception about, and it's that being frustrated isn't the problem. All right, let me say it again. Being frustrated is not the problem. Actually, if you're frustrated, it's possible that you're in good company. Uh, God demonstrated frustration and anger. One of the first times you see it is actually towards one of his choice servants, Moses. He's frustrated, he's angry with Moses because of his unwillingness to follow God's call. Jesus demonstrates anger and frustration towards the religious leaders of the day, right, and their lack of faith. So, being frustrated isn't the problem. Okay. Third, our response. Okay, how we as followers of Christ respond in moments of frustration and anger. That is the key. So, are we going to respond righteously and with godly wisdom, or are we going to respond with unrighteousness in foolish ways and ways that just, at the end of the day, don't please the Lord? So, We're all going to face it and we can't avoid it. 2, frustration isn't the problem, okay? Because God and Jesus, they experienced that too, so you might be in good company. And 3, it's our response in those circumstances that is what we really want to focus in on. Okay, now 2 questions for you. First question. Well, actually, let me get into James. I wanted to get there. So, James chapter 1, verses 19 to 20. This is after James just gets done about these early Christian believers being tested in their faith. And then he kind of starts to transition and he says, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." And so even there, James here, the brother of Jesus, delineates the difference between the anger, or he says the anger of man. So there's a different kind of anger that seems to be like a path towards destruction and foolishness, but not all anger lands that way. So, quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. Okay, on to our 2 questions. Number 1, what is it that's angering you? In moments where you feel yourself getting frustrated, you feel the anger starting to kind of rise up and you feel the blood boiling, what is it that's angering you? Is it a good thing? Because we live in a world that's broken, and to see some injustice, or to see someone being mistreated, that ought to anger you. That ought to frustrate you. And so if that's angering you, that's okay. All right. But if it's because someone's interrupting you, or maybe it's because things aren't going your way, you hit your thumb with a hammer. Okay, that's your fault. If you get angry at things like that, then I think that's potentially where you're missing the mark, and anger has started to head down an unwise or a foolish path. Okay, so what's angering you? The second question is your anger or frustration, is it controlling you? Because that's where we want to be careful. As followers of Christ, we want to be spirit controlled. We want God's Spirit to be working in our lives in a way that we demonstrate patience and the sense of calm and trust in a moment where things aren't going right. And so if your anger or frustration or the circumstances are causing you to lose control, to not be spirit controlled, what is controlling you then is your anger. All right, that's the sin coming out of us, and when the sin's controlling us, it leads to holes in the wall. It leads to people getting hurt. It leads to relationships being broken, and that's not where any of us want to be. Okay, so there's some thoughts about anger in particular, and it's something that a lot of us deal with often. Thankfully, we can be forgiven of that because God actually, in His anger, took out His anger towards sin and humanity's sin, took out His anger on His Son Jesus Christ, and because of that, we can be forgiven for our anger. And when we lose control, and then confess that at the foot of the cross, we can be forgiven. And that's good news. We can experience freedom from that in the future. And so, I know that sometimes anger feels good. It feels good to let it go because you've just let it out. You screamed or you hit something. But that's not a godly anger. And so in those moments, I hope you, like I, can trust God that His way is better for me. And so trust God in those moments. If it's taking a deep breath, what that's doing is just helping you to step outside the situation and think a little more clearly, and let God get control. So I hope your faith in those moments is strong. Okay? All right. Listen, I love you guys. Anxious to see you, like always. And I will see you next time. Okay? Bye.